And so I think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, maliki yawmiddin, iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina anamta alayhim ghayri al-maghdubi alayhim wa lad-dallin, sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله ولا أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. أما بعد، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك، عليكم منا جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقينا وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر الأحد منا لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Peace be upon you, O Aba Abdullah, and upon the souls who have gathered in your courtyard. Upon you from us all is the peace of God forever, for as long as we remain and as long as night and day endure. And may God never make this our last pledge to visit you. Peace be upon Hussein, and upon Ali the son of Hussein, and upon the children of Hussein, and upon the companions of Hussein. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So we've had 6 nights of foundation. On the first night we recovered a word, Shahada, which is not victimhood and never was, but rather it is witness, with the cost of witness borne in the body. On the second, we trace the chain from Abel through the prophets to the family of the prophet. On the third, we entered the theology of the candle, Sayyid Mutahhari's metaphor, and his 5 kinds of death. On the fourth, we heard Imam Husayn's diagnosis at Mina and the 3 silences, fear, comfort, and the narrowing of moral vision. On the fifth, we stood at the shared ground and the divergences between the Christian witness and our own, and we named the methodology that has carried us forward ever since, honor without conflation. Last night, we left the religious neighbor and entered the secular one. Marx, Fanon, and Dr. Shariati too moved things forward. And we asked what becomes of sacrifice when the form is preserved and the content is missing. Tonight we walk 1 step further. Tomorrow night, the final step. 3 nights. 3 middle panels in a triptych. The Husseini witness sits across. Last night was the secular revolutionary panel. Tonight is the anti-colonial national panel. And tomorrow is the aesthetic state-manufactured panel. The middle panel, tonight's, is the most sympathetic of all 3. We will honor what is true in it, and we will ask again, is sacrifice without the worship of the one God strong enough to hold what a witness is for? The verse that hangs over the night is from Surah Al-Hajj, the chapter of the pilgrimage, 22nd chapter of the Quran, verses 39 to 40, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Permission is given to those who are fought against because they have been wronged, and indeed God is capable of giving them victory. Those who have been expelled from their homes unjustly only because they said, 'Our Lord is God.' And had God not repulsed some people by means of others, there would have been pulled down monasteries and churches and synagogues and mosques in which the name of God is much remembered. And surely God will help those who help him. Indeed, God is strong, exalted in might." We heard a portion of this verse in the previous session. It stood inside the paragraph when we were discussing Fanon as the prophetic echo of what Fanon was articulating in the language of psychiatry on a desk in Algiers centuries after the revelation of Quran. Tonight, the verse is not in the body of the night. The verse is at the door. We do not turn to it sideways now. We walk through it. So, the classical exegesis tells us that this is the first verse of permission for defensive armed struggle in the entire Quranic revelation. For 13 or so years in Mecca and the early years in Medina, the Prophet's community was permitted to witness in word, to witness in life, and to bear, to carry, to absorb. This verse is the moment the permission to bear opens slightly, conditionally, with 3 locks on the door into the permission to defend. 3 things in the verse. The first, permission is given to those who are fought against because they have been wronged. It is the wronged, not the proud. It is those whom the violence has come to, not those who go toward the violence, as in who initiate the violence. The verse opens its door to the defended, not to the invading. That is the first lock, and the Quran never lifts it. The second, those who have been expelled from their homes unjustly, only because they said, "Our Lord is God." The verse does not name a flag. It does not name a tribe. It does not name any national identity. It names one sentence, the sentence the tongue speaks and that life carries. Our Lord is God. That is the second lock. And the third, had God not repulsed some people by means of others, there would have been pulled down monasteries and churches and synagogues and mosques in which the name of God is much remembered. The 4 houses of worship, the verse names. The hermit cells of the desert ascetics, the churches of the Christians, the synagogues of the Jews, and the mosques of the Muslims. Permission to fight in the Quran is granted in defense of the worship of the one God across the houses where the name of God is named. Not an empire, not a banner, not a nation, nothing like this. The places where God's name is much remembered. That's the third lock. 3 locks on the door. The wronged, the covenant of our Lord is God, and the houses where God's name is invoked. Tonight, we look at a people whose suffering the world will never really forget. We honor their wound. And we will ask, with the Quran as our anchor and these 3 locks as our test, was the something they died for the something the verse permits dying for? Tonight, we walk into Vietnam. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the first of the main points. Vietnam, a country that could not be deterred.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وجل فرجهم.
So there is one sentence that we have to begin with. If we had been a young person in Hanoi or Saigon between 1945 and 1975, we would have known this sentence the way our young people hopefully know Surah Al-Fatiha. It would have been said over the coffins of all of our friends. It would have been carved into the walls of all of our bus stations. The sentence was spoken by Ho Chi Minh, the founder of modern Vietnam, on the Voice of Vietnam radio on the 17th of July 1966, in response to the escalation of the American bombing campaign of his country. He said, and the references are all in the write-up as is normally the case, Ho Chi Minh said, "Nothing is more precious than independence and freedom." After his death, 3 years later, this sentence was carved into the entrance of his mausoleum. Reflect on what kind of sentence this is. It's not any poetic flourish. It's not the poet's flourish. It's not a slogan in the cheap sense. This was a head of state telling his people in a single line what they could be asked to die for. The sentence has a form of sacred declaration. It is short, it is absolute, and it admits no qualification. Remember, the sentence is, nothing is more precious than independence and freedom. Nothing, not life, not safety, not the bodies of one's children, is more precious than this. In our own tradition, this sentence has the cadence of a Shahada. Now please bear with me over here and please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that what Ho Chi Minh said is the Shahada. I'm saying it has the cadence of Shahada, and I will explain that. Firstly, you have negation, nothing. Then you have a comparative, is more precious than. then a declaration, independence and freedom. And it's the same skeleton as La ilaha illallah. There is no God except Allah. The first half empties the world. There is no God. There is nothing. And the second half places one thing in the center of this emptied world. That is the form of Shahada. The form of Shahada, not the Shahada. Please don't misunderstand me. And the question we will ask tonight, the question the whole night turns on, is whether the content matches the form. Whether independence and freedom by themselves, anchored in nothing higher, can hold the weight that the form is asking them to hold. Because if the cadence of Shahada can be filled with any content the speaker chooses, the cadence remains, but the witness empties. And if the form is empty, then everything we've been saying for the past 6 nights falls by the wayside. So we have to ask of Ho Chi Minh and every man and every woman who has ever spoken with this cadence, what is the content? So before we ask the question, we have to know who we are asking it of. Ho Chi Minh was not a comfortable revolutionary. He was not a man who shouted from a podium and slept in a palace. He was a man whose adult life was spent in motion. Paris in his 20s, Moscow in his 30s, Canton, Hong Kong, southern China, finally back to Vietnam in 1941, in his early 50s, after 30 years being away. He lived simply, he worked late, he wrote down everything. In August 1942, on a clandestine journey through southern China, he was arrested by the forces. And he spent the next 13 months in over a dozen different prisons. During that confinement, he composed 115 poems in classical Chinese. Later, these were published under the title of Prison Diary. The opening lines, the verses that stand at the door of the whole collection, run along the lines of this. My body is inside the prison, but my spirit is outside. And the reference you can find in the write-up. But hear this in its correct register. This is not the language of nihilism. This is the language of a man learning, one day at a time, in a prison cell, that the body is not the whole of the person. That the body can be confined and the spirit can be free. In the Persian Gnostic tradition that we have been walking through within this series, this is the language of the second stage of the soul's journey, the language of ishq, love. The stage at which the lover learns that what binds the body cannot bind what is in love with God. In the Husayni tradition, this is the language of sabr. The steadfastness our Imam Sajjad, peace and blessings be upon him, taught the people of Damascus from inside Yazid's chains. Now, before anyone gets the wrong idea, I am not for a second saying or telling you that Ho Chi Minh is akin to Imam Sajjad. Not at all. I don't want people to misunderstand me. What I am saying and what I'm telling you is that the instinct in this fragment, that the body is not the limit of the person, is an instinct that runs through every tradition that knows what witness means. The Vietnamese saw it in him. That's why they followed him for 30 years. And it is why a country of farmers absorbed the worst aerial bombardment with all sorts of horrific weapons in human history, more tonnage than was dropped on Germany in the Second World War. Only now, arguably, it's been broken by the Zionist regime and what it's done to Gaza and Lebanon. The country accepted this, absorbed this, and it did not break. Vietnam did not break. And we honor the man, but we don't flatten him. And we ask the question we are going to ask of him. Now, all of this killing, all of this carnage, the Americans called it body count. Robert McNamara, the Secretary of Defense under Kennedy and Johnson, was a Harvard Business School graduate who had run the Ford Motor Company before he ran the Pentagon. He believed that war could be reduced to a metric, and the metric could be optimized. And the metric he chose was bodies. Quote, if we can kill more of them than they can kill of us, eventually they will fold. This was the calculation. It was the wrong calculation. The most rigorous demographic study of the Vietnamese war deaths is by Hirschman, Preston, and Van Man Loy, published in 1995 in Population and Development Review. Their analysis estimates that between 30 and 46% of total Vietnamese war deaths during the period of the heaviest American engagement, that would be between 1965 and 1974, were entirely civilian. In that 9-year window alone, anything between 300 to 600 to more thousand civilians died directly from the bombing and the shelling and the operations of the United States regime. Broader estimates that include the full conflict period, the famine deaths, the disease, the displacement, and the side effects of things like Agent Orange and napalm and all of this horrific weaponry, go up to 2 to 5 million Vietnamese civilian dead. The references are in the write-up. Millions of civilians across 2 decades, at least 2 million across 2 decades. For one country smaller than the state of California. McNamara's planners expected a country absorbing this many casualties to fold by the 3rd year. They built their war plan around that expectation. The expectation was wrong. The Vietnamese kept on coming. And in our time, the US regime has made the same sort of mistake about the Palestinians, about the Lebanese, about the Iranians, and they keep making this mistake. McNamara, 28 years after the war in Vietnam ended, gave an interview to Errol Morris. He said this, listen carefully, we were terribly wrong. We didn't understand them. Now hear me very carefully. There is a thing the Vietnamese knew that McNamara did not. And there is a related thing that we, as the lovers of Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, of all people, also know. We, of all people, know what it's like to look at a people who could not be deterred by the body count. We have walked in our own century with peoples whose enemies expected them to fold by the 3rd week, and who were still there decades later. We will name them in the supplication at the close of tonight. The form of the Vietnamese sacrifice was complete. The willingness to die was total. The body count was met with the body count, and the body count was returned. We honor the form. Before the night closes, we will ask about the content. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the next point, which is two who burnt.
اللهم صل على محمد محمد وعجل فرجهم.
Before we leave the Vietnamese roots, I owe you one, perhaps two more figures. And this one is not Marx or Mao or Ho Chi Minh. Who we're talking about is a Buddhist monk. His name was Thich Quang Duc. He was 66 years old. And on the 11th of June 1963, at 9:30 in the morning, he sat down at the intersection of two streets in Saigon. 350 other monks and nuns walked beside him in 2 rows, carrying banners in Vietnamese and English. He sat on a small cushion in the middle of the intersection. Another monk poured petrol over his head and shoulders. Thich Quang Duc folded his hands and he set himself on fire. He did not flinch. He did not cry out. The reporters who were there said the only sound was the sound of the flames. Malcolm Brown, a photographer with the Associated Press, took the photograph that won the World Press Photo of the Year. Kennedy, 3 months before he himself was killed in Dallas, was reported to have said, looking at the photograph, "No news picture in history has generated so much emotion around the world as that one." The references are all in the write-up. Now, why was he burning? The American regime, American-backed regime of Diem in South Vietnam, this was the regime that was governing at the behest of the American Empire, a country that is 80% Buddhist. This regime had for years marginalized and persecuted the Buddhist majority. Buddhist pagodas, which is like their mosques, had been raided. Monks had been arrested. On the 8th of May 1963, the regime had banned the flying of Buddhist flags anywhere in religious festivities. Government forces had opened fire on the demonstrators that day. 9 people were killed. Thich Quang Duc left a written letter addressed to the President of the Republic. He writes, "Before closing my eyes, I respectfully plead to the President to take a mind of compassion and implement religious equality." Hear the content of his witness. He was not asking for any revolution. He was not asking for an army from the north. He was asking for the right of the Buddhist majority to fly their own flag on one of their holiest days in their own country without being shot by their own government. He gave his body in stillness and in public in order to ask that. Now, and this is where we have to be careful, because the methodology of this whole series is honor without conflation. We honor Thich Quang Duc. He sits cleanly inside the same instinct the verse names. He was wronged. He was expelled from his country's public life and from his community's worship. His worship was being suppressed. The verse names 4 houses, and the Buddhist temple is not one of them. We will, and we have to be honest about that. The Buddhist Sangha does not affirm the one God in the way the Quran means it. But the instinct the verse names is broad enough to recognize the man who burnt in the lotus position to ask for the right of his Sangha to fly its flag on the morning of the Buddha's birthday. We honor the instinct. We do not say the theology is identical. It is still not the Shahada of Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, before anyone gets the wrong idea. But it's closer than what surrounds it. Secondly, there is a 61-year-old echo that we must reflect on before we move on from this section. On the morning of the 25th of February 2024 in Washington, D.C., across the road from the embassy of the Zionist entity on International Drive in Van Ness in Washington, a young man in United States Air Force uniform, 25 years old, set up a phone on a tripod and he started a Twitch live stream and he began to speak. His name was Aaron Bushnell. He'd served 4 years in the Air Force as an information technology specialist. He had been working with mutual aid networks for the homeless. He had been reading very carefully. He had watched for 140 days what the country whose uniform he was wearing was helping to do to the people of Gaza. And on that morning in his uniform, on the public pavement, outside the embassy, he said this, and I'm going to give you his exact words. He said, and the reference, of course, is all in the write-up, "My name is Aaron Bushnell. I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit in genocide. I am about to engage in an extreme act of protest. But compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at the hands of their colonizers, it is not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal." Then he poured a flammable liquid over himself and he lit himself on fire. And the only words he would shout as the flames took his voice were 2. "Free Palestine." He repeated them until he could no longer make a sound. He died of his injuries later that evening. 61 years separate him from Thich Quang Duc. The continents, of course, differ, the decades differ, the uniforms differ, the theologies differ, the instinct does not. Quang Duc burnt because his country's regime was suppressing his people's worship. And Bushnell burnt because his country's regime was funding the suppression of another people's worship. Neither of them could be silent. Bushnell was not a Muslim. He was not a Husseini. His worldview was secular and humanist. We do not pretend his theology is ours. We do, however, honor the instinct. He saw what his uniform was being used for, and he refused to let his body be one of its instruments. He gave his body to ask of the country whose uniform he wore, what kind of worship are we practicing when we feed bombs to a people who say, our Lord is God in a different tongue? He used the only words he had left as the fire took him. Free Palestine. 2 words. He could have chosen any words, but he chose these 2. We name him and we honor him. We do not flatten him. It is still not the Shahada of Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, but it is closer than what surrounds it. And the lesson here is quite short. Sacrifice on a national scale, even at extraordinary cost, even with extraordinary discipline, produces a recognizable form of witness. The form alone is not the witness. The form is what the question is being asked of. Please give me a salawat and we move into the subject of what was true in Ho Chi Minh's vocabulary.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
Before we go to the limit, we have to honor the merit. 3 things are true in Ho Chi Minh's vocabulary. 3 things the Quran, read honestly, would not deny. The first, the dignity of a people refusing to be ruled by those who do not know them. In Quran, in Surah Al-Hujurat, the chapter of the chambers or the private apartments, 49th chapter of the Quran, verse number 13, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female and have made you into peoples and tribes that you may know one another. The verse does not say that you may compete. It does not say that you may dominate each other. It says that you may know one another. Vietnam's refusal of French rule and then American rule was a refusal in exactly the register the Quran names. They wanted to be known as a people on their own terms. That instinct is sound. The second, the refusal of humiliation. The verse we anchored the night with names humiliation as a category that opens the door to permission. No tradition that knows God can teach its people to accept being trampled upon. Vietnam refused to be trampled upon. The refusal is sound. And the third, and of course we have one of the famous sayings of Imam Husayn, Hayhat min al-dhilla, that we will never accept humiliation. And the third, the willingness to bear cost for what one believes. The Vietnamese paid the price. They paid it for 30 years, maybe more, in their fields, in their bodies, and in their children. That is honest, and it is hard, and it is real. And it stands as a rebuke to every tradition, including ours, that has at one time or another taught its people that comfort is faithfulness. The khutbah of Mina that we read together in session 4 named exactly this disease in the scholars of Imam Husayn's own time. They were silent because they had become comfortable. The willingness to bear cost is the opposite of the disease, of that disease. So listen to me. On these 3 counts, dignity, the refusal of humiliation, the willingness to bear cost, Ho Chi Minh and myself would have something to say to one another. All of us would. We do not condescend to him. But there is a man whose voice we are going to hear now who lived the 3 things in a far deeper register. Let's now move on to the point. Sayyed Abbas builds the bridge. His name was Sayyed Abbas al-Musawi, may God rest his pure soul. He was the 2nd Secretary General of the Islamic resistance in Lebanon. He was martyred on the 16th of February 1992 in a strike on the convoy returning from the memorial for Sheikh Raghib Harb, may God rest his pure soul, the man whose own martyrdom 8 years to the day earlier had taught the south of Lebanon what witness meant in their own century. Sayyid Abbas died along with his wife Sayyida Siham and his 5-year-old son Sayyid Hussein. May God rest all of their pure souls. The American-supplied helicopter that fired on his convoy did not distinguish between the commander and the child. And hear what Sayyed Abbas said from his pulpit in Biqa in the years between his return from the Hawza in Najaf and his martyrdom in 1992. Hear the line that pulls Ho Chi Minh's three true things out of the secular grammar and into the conventional grammar. Sayyid Abbas says, and the references are all in the write-up, there is a condition for whoever wants to be one of the close friends of God. They must heal the wounds of the tormented on earth. They must defend the oppressed on earth. This is a condition for anyone who claims to be loyal and devoted to God, the Blessed and the Exalted. Think about that. Sayyid Abbas took the exact three things that are true in Ho Chi Minh's vocabulary: dignity, refusal of humiliation, willingness to bear cost, and he named them as a condition of being a wali of God, a friend of God. Not as a substitute for the worship, not as a replacement for the Shahada, but as a condition of it. In Sayyid Abbas's grammar, the grammar of the Quran and of the Imams, peace and blessings be upon them, defending the oppressed is not a separate thing from worship. It is part of what the worship requires. That is the bridge. Ho Chi Minh's instinct was sound on the three counts. What was missing in his grammar was the anchor, the one God in whose name the wounds of the tormented are healed. Sayyid Abbas did not deny the instinct, he grounded it. The instinct without the anchor produces a movement. The instinct with the anchor, that produces a witness. We hold that bridge in our hands as we walk now into the limit. When the cause is anchored only in the people, only in the nation, only in history, that cause cannot hold what the form is asking it to hold. And there are three reasons for this. The first is the morning after. Vietnam reunified on the 30th of April 1975. The American helicopters lifted off the roof of the embassy in Saigon. The country had finally, after 30-odd years, been allowed to belong to itself, in a manner of speaking. The morning after. The new state inherited the moral capital of the war and the practical machinery of revolutionary discipline. Within a few years, the same revolutionary discipline that had liberated the peasantry and constructed the system of re-education camps, through which somewhere between 200,000 and 500,000 of the country's own people passed. The boat people, the famine years of 76 to 80, 1976 to 1980, the war with Pol Pot's Cambodia, the border war with China, the economic collapse before the Doi Moi reforms of 1986, finally pulled the country in pieces back from the brink. Now, I'm not saying this to score points against Vietnam. I'm saying this because the same pattern has played out in different countries, in different decades, for the entirety of the 20th century. You have Algeria after the coup. You have Cuba after the firing squads of La Cabana. And the pattern is like this. A cause anchored only in the nation has no resource for the morning after. It is here that the Husseini covenant and the Sayyed Abbas of our own century who carried it has an answer that the secular 20th century simply did not have. Here Sayyed Abbas, may God rest his pure soul, again. This time on the day he stood on the pulpit in Biqa and declared what the resistance was for, not just what it was against. Sayyid Abbas said, the reference again is in the write-up, carry the banner of lifting deprivation from the oppressed, the poor and the needy. Carry this banner. And then listen to the chain that follows. Sayyid Abbas reaches back into the words of the man whose imamah the entire 12th tradition rests upon, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, peace and blessings be upon him, the commander of the faithful. He reaches back to a letter Imam Ali wrote to one of his governors, Uthman ibn Hunayf al-Ansari, who was the governor of Basra. And the letter is preserved for us in Nahj Balagha. It's letter number 45. Uthman had been invited to a banquet in Basra, a feast where the rich were welcomed and the poor were turned away at the door. He attended. Word reached the commander of the faithful in Kufa, in the capital Kufa, and he wrote to his governor, not to dismiss him, but to educate him, to teach him. The line we need tonight is in the fourth section of it, and I quote, and of course the references are in the write-up. Imam Ali says, "If I had wished, I could have taken the way leading towards pure honey and fine wheat and silken cloth. But far be it from me that my whims should overcome me, and that my greed should lead me to choose between rich foods, while perhaps in the Hijaz or in Yamama, these are places, there are people who have no hope for bread, no acquaintance with the feeling of being fed. Shall I lie down with a satiated belly, while around me there are hungry stomachs and burning livers? Shall I lie down with a satiated belly, while around me there are hungry stomachs and burning livers?" This is the commander of the faithful in the year around 40 of the Hijrah, writing to his governor in Basra, 1400 odd years ago. A letter so old that the paper it was first written on has been dust for centuries, and yet the letter has not aged by a single nanosecond. What Sayyed Abbas did with this letter on his pulpit in Biqa was simple. He took Imam Ali's principle and he made it the positive program of the resistance. Listen to how Sayyid Abbas closed. And again, the references are all in the write-up. "And the whole world shall know that just as we were the pioneers in resisting the occupation, we shall be the pioneers in resisting neglect and deprivation." This is the answer that Vietnam could not give. This is the cause that knows what to do once the foreign army leaves, because the cause was never only about the foreign army leaving. The cause was the worship of the one God, lived as the love of God's poor. The first half of the cause is the no. No to the foreigner, no to the humiliation, no to the bombs. And the second half is the yes, the affirmation. Yes to the bread, yes to the dignity, yes to the worship that requires us to feed our very neighbors. A cause that leaves a cause with only the no leaves its children the morning after victory with a completely hollow condition. A cause with both the no and the yes, that cause produces a civilization. That cause produces a Hezbollah that runs hospitals and orphanages and schools alongside its missile units, because the same theology that licenses the missile licenses the school. Ho Chi Minh's grammar produced the no with extraordinary discipline. Yet he could not produce the yes, because his grammar had no place from where to produce it. Independence and freedom by themselves do not feed the children of Hanoi on the morning of the first day of peace. The worship of the one God, anchored in the love of the one God's poor, does. Please give me a salawat, and we look at the two captains, Ho Chi Minh and DM.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So in session 5, we walked with two captains who stood on the same field of Karbala, under the same desert sky on the morning of the 10th of Muharram. One captain crossed, that was Hur ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, peace and blessings be upon him, who walked his horse to the camp of Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, and asked to serve and to die there. The other chose Ray and the fire, Umar ibn Sa'ad, who lit the fire on the tents of the women and the children. Two captains, same field, same sky. The witness was in the choice. Tonight that figure returns. In Vietnam, there were also two captains. One was Ho Chi Minh, who chose his cause in Paris in 1919, at the door of the Versailles Peace Conference, with a petition asking the victors of the First World War to apply Wilson's principle of self-determination to French Indochina. The door was closed in his face. His cause was made by what he was refused. The other was Ngo Dinh Diem, who chose his cause in 1954, not the cause of his own people, but the cause of the Americans who installed him. He flew the Southern flag over his palace until November 1963, when his own generals, with American knowledge and consent, overthrew him in a coup and shot him in the back of an armored personnel carrier. The flag changed hands, the napalm did not. One captain crossed, one chose Ray and the fire. I'm not saying Diem is Umar ibn Sa'ad. I'm also not saying that Ho Chi Minh is Hor. I'm saying the logic of the field of Karbala does not stay in the 7th century. It is the logic of every age in which two paths are open and a man must choose which one he is on. The Vietnam of 1954 to 1963 had horrors and it had Umar ibn Sa'ad's. And the world to this day still does. Now, last night we read the warning in The Wretched of the Earth that the recovery of agency through violence does not stop when the agency is recovered. The violence has its own gravity. It pulls the revolution toward more violence, turned when the foreigner is gone, against the revolution's own children. Vietnam carries that warning into the next register. Algeria after the coup, Cuba after the firing squads, Vietnam after the camps. Edward Said, the great Palestinian writer, wrote it carefully in Culture and Imperialism in 1993. He said, the reference is all in the write-up, anti-colonial victory does not, by itself, produce a politics that knows what to do with the people once they are free. Dr. Shariati saw it in Paris in the early 60s. Dr. Shariati had grown up inside a tradition that taught, if the tradition was understood, that the recovery of agency requires both the no and the yes, and the anchor for both is the one God. Fanon could not see that. Dr. Shariati could. The wound of colonialism cannot be healed by the bandage of nationalism alone. The wound is far deeper and it needs deeper medicine. This is among the reasons that the movements of people like Jamal Abdel Nasser and all of these secular movements in the West Asia region collapsed under the weight of their own problems. Sacrifice in a worthy cause is honorable. We've said it. But honorable is not the same as complete. A worthy cause that is not anchored in the worship of the one God has no resource to govern its own children once any problems, any foreign army leaves. The witness of Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, is worthy at the moment of falling and worthy at the moment of waking the day after. This is the difference we are walking toward. Now, please give me a salawat and we move on to the third point about the sub-series that we have on Hajj Qasem. This time it's a stage on the road, Ma'rifat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
So in session 3, we walked the first stage of the Persian Gnostic path, Talab, the quest, the seeking. The boy in a village in Kerman whose father worked with the land and with water, not with books, and who was already being formed into a candle. In session 5, we walked with the second, Ishq, the love. The lover whose breath was bound to Imam Husayn's breath. The commander who fighting Daesh laughed and said, "May my Lord forgive me, my clothes are not the clothes of war," and went forward in his regular clothes all the same. Tonight we walk with the third, Ma'rifat. The word is from the same Arabic root as Arafah, the plain on which the pilgrims stand on the 9th of Dhul Hijjah, in the most weighted moment of the entire Hajj. The root means to know with the heart, not only with the mind, to recognize. The Persian Gnostic tradition names 7 stages on the soul's journey: Talab, Ishq, Ma'rifat, Istighasa, Tawheed, Hayra, and Faqr Fana. The book on Hajj Qasem that we've been working through and quoting across this series, Rafiq Khoshbakhtima, my fortunate friend, adds an 8th, Shahadat, the Husayni completion of the path. We have agreed to walk 4. Talab, which we have done. Ishq, which we have done. Ma'rifat, which is tonight, and Shahadat, which is the 9th night. So tonight, Ma'rifat, the discernment. The knowing with the heart that distinguishes a worthy cause from its counterfeits. 2 anecdotes from Hajj Qasem's life, both from the 3rd chapter of the book Rafika Khushbakhtema, My Fortunate Friend. The first is interior and the second is exterior. So the first one, this is a story Hajj Qasem himself told. The setting is the Iran-Iraq war. The front line at Shalamche. 2 of his men, Hussein Sadiqi and Akbar Musapur, had gone out on reconnaissance and had not come back. Hajj Qasem was sure the operation had been compromised, sure his men had been captured or worse. He drove out to the front and confronted the young intelligence officer, a teenager, the son of 2 school teachers. There were 100 Husseins at the unit, so they used to use the patronymic Hussein, the son of Ghulam Hussein. 2 days later, the young man radioed him, "Come back." Hajj Qasem came back. The young man, smiling at the corner of his mouth, said this, "Tomorrow, Akbar Musapur will come back." Hajj Qasem said, "Hussein, what are you saying?" The young man said, "Hussein, the son of Ghulam Hussein, says this." So Hajj Qasem stayed. The next afternoon, the men at the binoculars said, "There is a darkness in the water." They went down and they lifted Akbar Musapur out of the marshes. He had been martyred in the water. The day after, in the same place, Sadiqi's body floated up. Both at the point they had departed from, both as if the river itself had brought them back home. When it was over, Hajj Qasem asked the young man, "How did you know?" And the young man said, "Last night I saw Akbar Musapur in a dream. He told me, 'Hussein, we were not captured, we were martyred. Tomorrow at this hour, I will come back, and Sadiqi the day after.' And then the line I want you to carry home tonight. Do you know why Akbar Musapur was permitted to come to me? He had 2 virtues. He was married, and his namaz shab, his night prayer, was not interrupted, even in the water." The references are all in the write-up. The night prayer was not interrupted, even in the water. Hear what ma'rifat is. It is not deduction. It is not, "I have looked at the satellite imagery and concluded." It is the kind of seeing that comes through the unseen. The kind of knowing that namaz shab, which Ayatollah Khamenei has encouraged everyone to pray, the prayer of the deep night when no one is watching, sustains in a heart. The teenager could see what the commander could not see. And the commander, may God rest his pure soul, was humble enough, and this itself is a sign of his ma'rifat, to listen to him. The Vietnam beat we have just walked argued that human reason alone, anchored in the nation alone, cannot govern the morning after. Rafika Khushbakhtema gives us the answer, the answering register. There is a kind of knowing that is not human deduction. It is granted to those who keep the prayer that interrupts nothing. And the second anecdote is exterior. In November of 2017, the forces of the resistance, the Syrian Arab Army, Hezbollah, the Iraqi Hashd al-Sha'bi, the Iranian commanders, entered the city of Bukamal in eastern Syria. Its liberation broke the territorial back of the Daesh death cult. In the days of the operation, Hajj Qasem's men used a private home as a temporary command post. They did not ask the family's permission. There was no time and the family had been displaced. When the operation was over, before he left, Hajj Qasem sat down and wrote a letter. He left it in the house for the family to find when they returned. The letter is preserved in his own handwriting in page 41 of the book Rafika Khushbakhtema. Listen to what it says. Hajj Qasem writes, and the reference, like I say, is in the write-up. "Dear and respected family, peace be upon you. I am your little brother Qasem Soleimani. You surely know me. We have served the Sunni community in many places. I am a Shia and you are a Sunni. But I am also in some way Sunni because I believe in the Sunnah of the Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions. And God willing, I move on his path. And you are also in some way Shia, because you love the Ahl al-Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them. First, I ask your forgiveness and I hope you will accept my apology that we used your home without permission. Second, any damage that has come to your home, we are ready to pay for it. I prayed in your home and I prayed 2 rak'ah with the intention of you. And I ask God the Most High that you may have a good ending. I am in need of your prayers. Your brother or your son, Soleimani. Here are the 3 things in this letter. The first, the cause is named. Not Iran, not Shiism, not the resistance, but rather the sunnah of the Messenger of God, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, and love of the Ahl al-Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them. 2 registers named in the same sentence, named as the one cause under which both the Sunnah and the Shia stand. Ma'rifat in the first register. The discernment that the cause is bigger than the sect. Second, the discernment is enacted. The family's books are read. The damage is offered to be paid for. The use of the home is apologized for in writing with the speaker's name in a war, in a city just retaken from the most pitiless death cult of many, many centuries. The commander writes a personal apology to a Sunni family for the use of their kitchen. Ma'rifat in the second register. The discernment that gestures of dignity in the smallest things are themselves the witness. And the third, the worship of God is performed in the home. 2 rak'ah with the intention of the family. This is ma'rifat in the third register. The discernment that the cause is grounded in the end in the worship of the one God. And that the worship of the one God is what ties the Sunni family and the Shia commander and the master of the witnesses on the plain of Karbala into one chain of witness. The wound that Vietnam could not heal alone, the wound that Fanon could not heal alone, meets in this letter the only thing strong enough to hold it, the covenant. We are not fighting a war to install a flag over your country. We are fighting a war to defend the worship that you and we perform in different rooms of the same house. That is ma'rifah. That is what the third stage looks like when it is lived. That, God willing, is what we are asking for every time we say, may God rest the pure soul of Hajj Qasem Soleimani. We are asking that the discernment he was given be granted to us also. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the point that is, the test is not scale.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
The first thing we learn from Vietnam is that the scale of a sacrifice does not by itself sanctify it. 2 million Vietnamese dead, perhaps more. Whole villages turned into nothing. Children whose names were never written down, whose graves were never dug, whose mothers walked into the marshes looking for what was left of them. And the Quran's question, asked of every age, asks of these graves too, what was the something? We do not insult the graves by asking. We honor them by asking. The Quran itself recognizes that wronged people are permitted to fight. The verse does not say, by saying so, make every fight a witness. The verse does not, by saying so, make every grave a candle. This is very important. The verse does not, by saying so, make every fight a witness. And the verse does not, by saying so, make every grave a candle. Permission is a category. Witness is a verdict. Do not let the size of a cause's body count be confused with the size of its truth. That is the first thing. The second thing we learn is that the test of a cause is not the dignity of its founder, the suffering of its people, or the beauty of its slogan. The test is whether the cause is the cause of the Imam of the age. May our souls be his ransom. May God hasten his return. This is the test our fourth sermon on the Khutbah of Mina set up. Imam Husayn in Mina asked the scholars, for whom are you keeping silent? The same question in the affirmative voice is, for whom is your walking? The Vietnamese walked for Vietnam. Sayyed Abbas, may God rest his pure soul, walked for the worship that was the same in his pulpit in the Biqa as it was in the home of the Sunni family Hajj Qasem would later apologize to in Syria. The test of every Shia, every Muslim, every honest human being who has touched what Imam Husayn touched is for whom is your walking. And here is where the seed our beloved Imam Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, planted in the years of his exile in Najaf. The seed we planted with you in the series last night. It is the place where this seed finds its root. In January of 1970 in Najaf, in the lectures that became the book Hukumat Islami, Islamic Government, Imam Khomeini told the seminarians a sentence that I want us to hear again, because tonight it is the door of the answer. The sentence is, the religious scholars must learn politics from Islam, not take their Islam from Western and Eastern politicians. 9 years later, the revolution carried that sentence out into the open. The slogan that grew out of it was 3 Farsi words. Na Sharqi, na Gharbi, Jamhuriya Islami. Neither East nor West, Islamic Republic. I'm not going to sit and walk you through the history of that slogan tonight. We will, God willing, do that on the night of this series that takes the revolution as its subject, which will be in the Arba'in sessions. Tonight, I only want you to hear how directly it answers the question Vietnam asks. Ho Chi Minh's vocabulary was Sharqi. He was supported by Moscow and Beijing. The DM regime's vocabulary was Gharbi. He was supported by Washington. But the question we're asking tonight is not which side were they on. The question is whose worship was they walking for? Neither Ho Chi Minh nor DM could answer that question with the answer the Imam of the age, may our souls be his ransom, with an answer that the Imam would recognize. Neither East nor West. The Imam of the age is the test. And here I want to put 2 voices side by side. And I want you to hear them in the same breath. And you tell me by the time the second finishes, whether 2 leaders separated by 40 years of history are not standing on the same line, citing the same Imam and dying for the same cause. The first voice, Sayyed Abbas al-Musawi, may God rest his pure soul, from a pulpit in Biqa in February of around 1986. He has a number of years still left on this world. He said, the enemies may root themselves against us, but we are on the path of our Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul. We believe in the principle established by this Imam. Kill us, for our nation will become more and more aware. The reference is in the write-up. And the second voice, 40 years, almost to the month, after Sayyid Abbas said those words, the 17th of February 2026, 11 days before the speaker would be martyred, may God rest his pure soul, in a joint American Zionist airstrike on Tehran in the morning of the 28th of February 2026, the 8th of Ramadan of 1447. Together with generals and the children of the Shajara Tayyibah school in Minab, he's delivering what will be his last televised address to the people. The address is titled, in the published transcripts, Power, Dignity, and the Unbreakable Nation. And he closes it like this, and the reference is in the write-up. He says, by God, if they kill us, our people will understand more. This is the principle established by Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul. Kill me, and my people will awaken, all the more, again and again. We stand firmly on this path. Hear what just happened. Sayyid Abbas in 1986, on the path of our Imam Khomeini. Kill us, our nation will become more and more aware. Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, in 2026, 11 days before his martyrdom. This is the principle established by Imam Khomeini. Kill me and my people will awaken more and more. The same principle, same Imam, same line, same cause, generations apart. Both speakers martyred for the principle they spoke. This is the answer. This is what na Sharqi na Gharbi, neither East nor West, means in the lived register. The Imam of the age is the test. And here is what it looks like when 2 leaders pass the test. separated by about 40 years and one generation of the resistance. Ho Chi Minh's leaders died for Vietnam, and Vietnam, with all our honouring, is in history now. Sayyed Abbas and Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may God rest both their pure souls, died for the Imam of the age. And the Imam of the age is not history. He is in the unseen, watching every one of us, waiting for the appointed hour, waiting for us to be ready. And that is the difference, and that is everything. The lesson here is a very simple single sentence. The worthiness of a cause is measured not by its banner, but by whose banner the worship returns to. And the third thing we learned from Vietnam is that the complete cause must be both worth the dead and worth the building. A cause worth dying for that is not also worth building a civilization around will leave its children to inherit either a slogan or a security state. The post-1975 trajectory of Vietnam is not unique. It is the predictable shape of revolutions whose theology stops at independence. Sayyid Abbas told us on his pulpit in a sentence that is one of the most direct things any resistance leader has ever said about what we are for, the following. He said, and the reference again is in the write-up, if the wealthy do not attend to the poor in this stage, then when will they ever do so? For whoever seeks Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, and whoever seeks the lesson of Imam al-Husayn, the first lesson they must learn is this one. The poor are a trust from God upon our necks. The first lesson of Imam al-Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, is the lesson of the poor. Not the lesson of the sword, not the lesson of the standard or the flag, not the lesson of the great refusal in Yathrib or the great speech in Mina. The first lesson is the lesson of the poor as a trust from God upon our necks. Sayyid Abbas is not inventing this. He's reading Imam Husayn the way the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them, have always been read by the people who understood them best, as a project of both liberation and daily attendance to the dignity of the human person. The cause is total enough for the death because it is tender enough for the morning bread. And then listen, because this is the line of the night, the line that the whole sermon has been earning. Sayyid Abbas gives us the structural payoff. He says, again, the references are in the write-up. Sayyid Abbas says, I do not want Karbala to remain only in history. When Karbala remains in history and is separated from our current reality and our current era, it is no longer the Karbala that Imam Husayn intended. Imam Husayn and the Ahlul Bayt intended for every day to be Karbala and for every place to be, every day to be Ashura. He intended for every land to be Karbala, spanning across history and throughout the generations. And the maxim Sayyid Abbas is reaching for is older than the resistance. كل يوم عاشوراء وكل أرض كربلاء. Every day is Ashura and every land is Karbala. And this phrase has been carried across Shia traditions. It's preserved in multiple books. You can find the references in the write-up. And it was spoken and taken up by Dr. Ali Shariati, as we said in one of the previous sessions, in the lecture halls of Tehran and Mashhad in the 70s. Sayyid Abbas gives the maxim its sharpest 20th century edge. I do not want Karbala to remain only in history. If we keep Karbala only in history, if we visit it only in our majalis once a year and we weep and we go home unchanged, we have failed the master of witnesses, peace and blessings be upon him. He did not die so that we could weep about his death once a year. He died so that every day would be Ashura and every land would be Karbala. Every day, a day in which we choose between Yazid and Husayn, and every land, a land on which the choosing is required. That is the cause that is worth both dying for and building around. It is worth dying for because every day is Ashura. The covenant is renewed every morning. The standard is held every morning. And it is worth building around because every land is Karbala. Every neighborhood is a place where the trust of the poor is on our necks. Every household is a place where Imam Husayn is to be taught to the children, and where the Sunni family in Syria is to be apologized to in writing for the use of their kitchen. The cause is total in the moment of falling, and tender at the moment of the morning bread. This is what no 20th century revolutionary frame achieved. And this is what we have been given. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the pact that we make tonight.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So, what do we carry home tonight? 3 things. The first, the size of a cause's body count is not the size of its truth. Do not confuse scale with witness. The Vietnamese paid more in blood than almost any other people of the 20th century. We honor that. We do not let it confuse us. The second, the test of a cause is the Imam of the age. May our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return. Not the color of the flag, not the geography of its founders. Whose worship is your walking for? That is the question. Sayyed Abbas and Imam Khamenei, may God rest both their pure souls, both passed that test, separated by around 40 years, citing the same Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, and dying for the same cause. The third, a complete cause is both worth dying for and worth building around. A cause that knows only the no will leave you the yes to figure out by yourselves the morning after. And the morning after will not forgive the cause for having no answer. Every day is Ashura, every land is Karbala. The yes in those 2 sentences, we do not have to invent it. We only have to live it. That is the pact that we try and make tonight. And the road ahead. So tomorrow, God willing, we walk into the 3rd panel of the triptych. If the secular revolutionary is Marx and Fanon, if the anti-colonial national is Ho Chi Minh, the aesthetic state-manufactured is Japan. Tomorrow we walk into the Bushido. We walk into the cherry blossom that the samurai believed told the truth about the noble death. We walk into the kamikaze pilots of 1944 and 1945, whose youth was used by their state with an aesthetic horror the 20th century has not stopped reckoning with. What happens to a great theology of the noble death when it is severed from the worship of the one God and put into the service of an empire? That is tomorrow. Tonight, we still have a riverbank to walk to. The question this series asks every night is the same question. Where is your brother? Tonight, we ask it of the field of Karbala on the 7th of Muharram. We ask it of the man at the riverbank. We ask it of every commander in every age who has walked towards water for the children of someone else's tent. We ask it of ourselves. Where is your brother? And whose worship is his walking for? So I bring you at this hour to the banks of a river. The river is the Furat, the Euphrates. It runs west of the encampment of the Master of Witnesses, peace and blessings be upon him. But the day at the riverbank is not tonight. Tonight is the 7th of Muharram, in the year 61 of the Hijrah. And tonight, in the chronicles such as Tabari ibn Tawus and Akhbar Tiwal preserve things for us, the message has arrived in the camp of Umar ibn Sa'ad that Ibn Ziyad in his palace at Kufa has said, block al-Husayn and his companions from the water. Do not let them taste a drop of it. Tonight the order has been given. Tonight 500 horsemen ride to the bank of the river to block the camp from the only water in the desert. Tonight the children of Ahl al-Bayt begin a thirst that will not be relieved until the morning of the 10th. 3 days. The days at the riverbank, the days of the hands, is 3 days from this night. The day of Ashura, the 10th of Muharram. By that morning, the water of the river will have been cut from the camp for 3 days. The tongues of the children will have thickened in their mouths. The elders will have refused again and again to drink before the children. And Abu al-Fadl Abbas, peace and blessings be upon him, will have moved between the tents in the way a brother moves when his brother's children cannot ask for water in their own voices. And on the morning of the 10th, when the thirst has gone past where any human body can carry it, Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, will turn to his half-brother, and his half-brother will turn to the river. There is a man standing at the riverbank. He is the half-brother of Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him. He is the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib, peace and blessings be upon him, by Fatima bint Hizam, the woman from the tribe of Banu Kilab, whom Imam Ali married after the passing of Sayyid Fatima al-Zahra, peace and blessings be upon her. His mother bore Imam Ali 4 sons, and all 4 would fall at Karbala on the day of Ashura. Because of these 4 sons, the Shia tradition has carried her name ever since as al-Banin, the mother of the sons. And al-Banin would not be the only mother of the household keeping vigil that morning. Sayyid Zainab, peace and blessings be upon her, had also sent her own 2 sons out at first light, Awn and Muhammad, the sons of Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar. So that the long vigil the Shia tradition has remembered as hers began on the morning she sent her sons. He himself is called Abul Fadl, the father of Fadl, after his eldest son. And his name is al-Abbas. He carries the standard of his brother. And the standard is a piece of wood. The standard is a piece of cloth. The wood and the cloth are not the standard. The standard is the cause whose proof is its own carrier. Tonight you will be taken to the riverbank. You will hear in the voice of the hidden Imam, may our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return, what happened at the riverbank when the standard could not be put down. He will tell you about the right hand, and he will tell you about the left hand. And he will tell you about the mace, and about the water skin, and about the sand, and about Imam al-Husayn kneeling in the sand and saying the words that have not stopped echoing since. I'm going to step aside now and let you hear it for yourselves. But before I do, I want you to remember one thing. Abbas is the perfected anti-colonial witness. Not because he refused a colonial occupation, not because he carried a national flag, not because he was on the eastern side or the western side of any quarrel of his time. He is the perfected anti-colonial witness because his standard was for the proof of God, for the Imam of the age. In his time, his elder brother, Imam al-Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, and not for any flag that could one day be folded away and discarded. His cause was Sayyid Abbas's cause, Hajj Qasem's cause, Martyr Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei's cause, and the cause of every man and every woman in this room who has ever asked the question we have been asking tonight and answered it in the way the Master of the Witnesses, peace and blessings be upon him, taught us to answer it. Whose worship is your walking for? Tonight, on the 7th of Muharram, 14 centuries on, we walk for him. So now we have a short supplication and then we conclude. So, peace be upon Abel, the first witness on the earth. Peace be upon every witness in every tradition who refused to bow to other than God. Peace be upon every man and every woman who has ever been wronged, expelled from their home only because they said, our Lord is God. O God, we have nowhere to go but your door. You are the one who gave permission to the wrong to defend the worship of your name in the 4 houses where your name is invoked as per Quran. You are the one who placed the locks on that door, the lock of the wrong, the lock of our God, our Lord is God, and the lock of the houses of worship, so that no empire and no nation and no flag could pretend to stand under the permission you gave. O God, send your peace and your blessings on your last messenger, Muhammad, and upon his family, his righteous companions. Send your peace on the prophets of every house, on Adam, on Abel, on Noah, on Abraham, on Ismail, and Ishaq, on Moses, on Aaron, on David, on Solomon, on John the Baptist, on Zachariah, on Jesus, the son of Mary, on every one of those whose names we know and whose names only you know. O God, tonight we have honored a country whose dead the world will not stop counting. We have honored Vietnam. We have honored the man who told his people that nothing was more precious than independence and freedom. We have honored the monk who burnt in silence. We have honored the willingness to bear cost. We have refused to flatten any of them. We have asked, with your verse as our anchor, the question your verse asks of every age. We thank you for the verse, we thank you for the locks, and we thank you for the answer. O God, send your peace on Sayyed Abbas al-Musawi, who told us that the condition of being one of your friends is to heal the wounds of the tormented and to defend the oppressed. Who told us that we shall be the pioneers in resisting neglect and deprivation, just as we were the pioneers in resisting the occupation. Who told us that the first lesson of Imam Husayn is the lesson of the poor, that the poor are a trust from God upon our necks. Who told us in the line that this whole night has been earning that he did not want Karbala to remain in history. Send your peace upon his honourable wife, Sayyid Siham, and on his 5-year-old son, Sayyid Hussein, who fell with him in the same convoy on the road back from Sheikh Raghib Harb's commemoration. Send your peace on Sheikh Raghib Harb himself, who taught the south of Lebanon what it means to refuse the handshake of the occupier 8 years to the day before his student joined him. O God, send your peace on Hajj Qasem Soleimani, the standard bearer of our own century, the man whose ma'rifat carried what could not be put down, the man who wrote a personal apology to a Sunni family for the use of their kitchen and who prayed 2 rak'ah with the intention of them in their own home. O God, grant us the discernment that you granted him. Grant us the ma'rifah of the cause that is bigger than the sect, the dignity that is enacted in the smallest of things, the worship that ties the Sunni family and the Shia commander and the master of the witnesses to the plain of Karbala into a single chain of witness. O God, in this Muharram, the first since the martyrdom of our beloved Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, send your peace upon him, the man who days before his Shahada stood before the nation of Iran and repeated to them the principle Sayyed Abbas had repeated 40 years earlier from his pulpit in Biqa, that if they kill us, our nation will become more and more aware. The man who held the line of neither east nor west for years during the seat of his leadership. We hold him tonight only in passing. We know that the night that takes him as its subject is not yet, but it is coming. Welcome him into your nearness, O God, with your prophets and your imams and your martyrs and your saints. O God, send your peace upon the children of Minab, 168 of them, boys and girls, teachers and parents, who fell on the same morning their leader fell, on the 8th of Ramadan, in the Shajara Tayyiba school in Hormozgan, by a tomahawk that came from a country that signed the laws of war and then broke them. The children whose names their mothers will never stop writing, whose witness was complete the moment their teacher's hand closed over theirs. O God, send your peace upon every young man of the resistance who took his father's place and his grandfather's burden in his hands. Peace be upon every young Palestinian who has died in the rubble of his father's house in Gaza, holding what he could of his family in a cloth. Peace be upon every Lebanese, every young Lebanese who fell in the south. Peace be upon every young Iraqi of the Hashd al-Sha'bi who walked into the open against Daesh. Peace be upon every young Yemeni and every young Syrian who carried water for the children of someone else's tents. Peace be upon every medic in Gaza who did not stop. Peace be upon every fighter on every resistance front of our generation who returned to his mother with his sleeve folded under and would not let her weep at the sleeve. Peace be upon the Sunni families, like the families in the home whose home Hajj Qasem wrote the letter in. O God, the longer return is to Imam al-Husayn, the master of the witnesses, in whom every chain finds its completion, to his brother Hassan, to their father Ali ibn Abi Talib, the commander of the faithful, the man who could not sleep in Kufa with a full stomach because there was a man in Hijaz who had not eaten that day, to their mother Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, the daughter of the Prophet, to the Imams of guidance in the chain that runs from Imam Husayn to the Imam of our age, may our souls be his ransom, and may you, O our beloved Lord, hasten his return. O God, send your peace upon al-Abbas ibn Ali, peace and blessings be upon him, the moon of Banu Hashim, the standard bearer, the water carrier, to whom we are walking in the next breath, in the voice, and we have walked in the maqtal, in the voice of his nephew, the hidden Imam. O God, we pray to you for Imam Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei, the new Wali al-Faqih, the son who has taken his father's place at the head of the worship. Preserve him for us, O God. Strengthen him, guide him, make him the leader he was trained to be and the leader you have appointed him to be. until the Imam of our age, may our souls be his ransom, returns, and the line he carries is handed back to its rightful holder. O God, hasten the return of the Imam of our age. Make us of his helpers, his soldiers, and those who, when he calls, are already standing. O God, we have nowhere to go but you, and no one to ask but you, and no words except those you have placed on the tongues of your friends. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We belong to God, and to him we return. And we repeat your promise, an eternal promise for justice and a warning for the wrongdoers. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. And the wrongdoers will soon know at what goal they will end up. And we add from the depths of everything that we have learned tonight, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. God is sufficient for us, and he is the best of guardians. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. Wa akhiru da'wani alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.